Salvete omnes! Welcome to Beginner's Latin Lesson 21. This lesson is about the Roman calendar and Roman dates. This lesson will take a slightly different format to previous lessons in the series. I'll be discussing some Roman history and there'll be a lot of new vocabulary to absorb as well. This lesson is about Roman dates, but it's also an opportunity for us to revise third declension nouns, as well as explore uses of the ablative and the accusative cases. We'll start by discussing the scene depicted in this painting. The Ides of March was a date in the Roman calendar corresponding to the 15th of March. This date is often associated with the assassination of the Roman statesman and military leader, General Julius Caesar, in 44 BC. In the Shakespearean tragedy of the same name, a soothsayer warned Caesar to beware the Ides of March, the day on which Caesar meets his unfortunate demise, having been betrayed by his ally, Marcus Brutus. The murder of Caesar escalates into a sequence of tumultuous events which throw Rome into civil war. These are the origins of the superstitions with which the Ides of March are often met. Aside from this, the Ides were days of religious observation in ancient Rome. But what exactly is the Ides of a month? What does that mean? So the Romans organised their years into months, each of which consisted of the same three principal days. These were the calends, which was the first of the month. So the calends of January is New Year's Day for us. Calends comes from the word calendae. The word calendae, from which calends originates, is where we get our English word calendar. Calends is also associated with the new moon. Next, after the calends, we have the nones. The nones is typically the 5th or the 7th of the month, depending on its length. The nones is also associated with the numeral 9, and it was typically the 8th day before the Ides of a month. As we'll learn later, the way the Romans counted months and the days between these three principal parts was inclusive, which is why the nones of a month falls on the 5th or the 7th, despite being 9 days prior to the Ides. And next, let's move on to the Ides, which occurs in the middle of the month. The Ides are full months, so those are months which have 31 days, such as March, May, July, and October, is the 15th day of the month. And for shorter months, that's all other months, it's the 13th. Calendae and nonae are both first declension nouns. All three, calendae, nonae, idus, are feminine plurals. Idus might look unfamiliar as a feminine plural because it's a fourth declension noun, a group of nouns we have not yet studied in this course. There are two important points we must understand well in order to correctly read and write Roman dates. So first of all, we need to understand the vocabulary concerning months and days. And second, we need to understand how these dates are expressed once we have this new vocabulary. This includes some Roman or Latin numbering and also how days were counted in ancient Rome. Let's start with months. Over the period of the Roman Empire, and afterwards as well, calendars were adopted and modified. For simplicity, we'll focus here on the Julian calendar. This takes its name from Julius Caesar, which is quite fitting because we started by discussing the Ides of March. We'll look at the Julian calendar as it appeared after 45 BC, when it incorporated a leap day in February to account for the length of the Earth's orbit around the Sun. So the word mensis means month. It's a third declension noun, and there are 12 months in the Julian calendar. Januarius, Februarius, Martius, Aprilis, Maius, Junius, Quintilis or Julius, Sextilis or Augustus, September, October, November, December. July has two names. One is an ordinal name, as it's the 5th month. This is a little bit confusing because in the Julian calendar it's clearly the 7th month, but Romans originally organised themselves into 10 months, making July the 5th month after Martius, or March, and hence Quintilis. The other name is for Julius Caesar. Similarly, the month of August was originally the 6th month, and in the Julian calendar it's also named for General Julius Caesar's heir, the Emperor Augustus. The final two columns also show where the nones and ides are for each of these months. For months with a length of 31 days, the nones is the 7th day of the month and the ides is the 15th day of the month. For all other months, the nones is the 5th day of the month and the ides is the 13th day of the month. The ides is always 8 days after the nones of a month. So how about expressing Roman dates? Romans counted days with respect to how far they were from the calends, nones and ides of that month or the next month. This counting was done inclusive of the dates being counted. So January the 13th would have been described as 3 days before the ides of January because the ides would be included. So that's January the 13th, January the 14th, January the 15th, 3 days apart. When thinking about how we express Roman dates, it's important that we think of how time is expressed in Latin. So time can be expressed in Latin using both the ablative and the accusative cases, depending on how we're expressing time. We've looked at or discussed other uses of the ablative, including the ablative of instrument or means and the ablative of manner. We've also looked at how we can use the accusative as a direct object in a sentence. When we're looking at using the accusative for expressing time, mean that we're talking about the duration or for how long an event occurred. When we use the ablative of time, we're thinking about at what time specifically or within which time frame an event occurred. So there's one very important word we need to consider when looking at expressing dates in Latin, and that is the word dies, which is the word for a day. Here it is in both its singular and plural forms for all 6 cases. We have dies, die, die, diem, die, dies, and in the plural we have dies, dierum, diebus, dies, diebus, dies. It's interesting that this noun can appear as both a masculine or a feminine noun. Typically, when dies is masculine, it's in the plural form, and feminine for some dates, especially ones which personify Roman goddesses or express the passage of time. I've highlighted diem and die because these are the accusative and ablative singular forms of this noun, and they'll be particularly useful when we're looking at expressing dates in the Roman calendar. So here are some more important words and phrases which we need to consider. We've already looked at menses, dies, which are month and day, mensis being a third declension noun. So as well as that, we have the preposition ante, which means before, and this is always followed by the accusative. As we discussed in lesson 2, typically prepositions in Latin are either followed by a noun in the accusative or a noun in the ablative. And ante happens to be one that is followed by a noun in the accusative. So we have the expression ante diem, which means the day before, and it's sometimes abbreviated to AD. Here are some other nouns that it's important that we know. Hodie means today. It literally means on this day, and is a contraction of hoc, meaning this or that, NDA. We have on the day before, predie, which is followed by a noun in the accusative, and on the day before, postridie, which is also followed by an accusative. Furthermore, we have calendai, nonai, and idus, the calends, nones, and ides, which are followed by the adjective form of the month. For example, calendai februarii would be the first day of February. In later forms of Latin, you may see these words calendai nonai and idus followed by the month expressed as a genitive. But this vocabulary is useless to us if we can't express the number of days we're counting towards. For this we require ordinal numbers. An ordinal number is one which tells us the position of an item in a sequence. In English we use words such as first, second, third, and fourth. We can also use larger ordinals such as 50th, 51st, 100th, 1000th. For now we'll look at the first 10 ordinal numbers. Here they are, including the numerals associated with them and the English translation in a table. We have primus, secundus, tertius, quartus, quintus, sextus, septimus, octavus, nonus, decimus. So primus, first, secundus, second, tertius, third, quartus, fourth, quintus, fifth, sextus, sixth, septimus, seventh, octavus, eighth, nonus, ninth, decimus, 10th. So now let's have a look at some dates in Latin and see if we can translate their meaning. Remember that the Romans used inclusive counting to count towards their principal 3 dates, the calends, nones, and ides. And remember, if we're counting towards the calends of one month, say February, the month we're talking about must be in January. Here is the first date, Idus Martii, March the 15th. What happens if we have it in the ablative, Idibus Martis? The meaning changes here to be on March the 15th. This is an example of the ablative of time. Let's have a look at another date. Calendai Octobres, October the 1st. Calendis Octobribus, on October the 15th. Pridie calendas Januarias, on December the 31st. Pridie idus meas, on May the 14th. Ante diem quartum nonas meas, on May the 4th. Ante diem quintum idus Julias, on July the 11th. Ante diem tertium calendas Julias, on June the 29th. Ante diem septimum calendas Decembres, on November the 25th. Pridie nonas Septembres, on September the 4th. I'll leave you with a quote to end the lesson. Carpe diem, seize the day, make the most of the day.